Donald Trump and Mike Johnson are getting trouble on the big, beautiful bill, not from Democrats, from Republicans, of course.
You know, the bigger a bill, the more it includes, the more difficult it is to get everybody to agree to things. I supported the tax cuts in 2017. I support making them permanent, so I support that part of the bill. I support spending cuts. I think the cuts currently in the bill are wimpy and anemic, but I still would support the bill, even with wimpy and anemic cuts, if they weren't going to explode the debt. The problem is the math doesn't add up. They're going to explode the debt by, the House says $4 trillion. The Senate's actually been talking about exploding the debt $5 trillion.
These are the fiscal hawks. They're in the past. I hate to say it, but the Republican Party is moving on from the Freedom Caucus is who's doing it. This is Ron Johnson and Rand Paul promising to give Trump hell on this. We're going to watch this. At the end of this video, you'll be all caught up on the big, beautiful bill and its journey to the Senate and what's going to prevent it from getting passed. Although, do not bet against Mike Johnson. Welcome to Doug in Exile. Watch this. This is Ron Johnson, enemy of Mike Johnson.
Oh, first of all, let me say I have nothing but respect for Speaker Johnson. I understand and sympathize with the challenge he has. I have, nothing but support for what President Trump is trying to do. I love the way he's acting boldly and swiftly, decisively to fix the enormous messes left by the Biden administration. From my standpoint, this is a budget reconciliation process, so we ought to talk about numbers. One of my disappointments with what the House process is about, the only number we ever heard about was $1.5 trillion, which sounds like a lot, but it's only $150 billion per year. And this is put in context of the fact that in 2019, we spent $4.4 trillion. This year we'll spend over $7 trillion. $150 billion on that is basically a rounding error.
Jake Tapper's all too happy to put on these Republicans that are trying to destroy Trump. That's Ron Johnson, a guy I like a lot. But dude, this is a wrong play. You're not going to win this. You're probably going to give in is what I'm hoping for, or your career needs to be over. Here's Rand Paul.
This year in September, when our fiscal year ends, the deficit will be about $2.2 trillion. Now, people used to always say, the Republicans would say, what's Bidenomics? That's Biden spending levels. When March, every Republican, virtually every Republican other than me, voted to continue the Biden spending levels, which are going to give us a $2.2 trillion deficit. Now, if you increase the debt ceiling $4 to $5 trillion, that means they're planning on $2 trillion this year and more than $2 trillion next year. That's just not conservative. So I've told them if they strip out the debt ceiling, I'll consider, even with the imperfections, voting for the rest of the bill. But I can't vote to raise the debt ceiling $5 trillion. There's got to be someone left in Washington who thinks debt is wrong and deficits are wrong and wants to go in the other direction.
So I'm gonna start on that. Ask what you guys support down and below. Trump might need to expand the debt ceiling by $5 trillion on the big, beautiful bill. Should Rand Paul still sign it? I think he should. I think Trump needs some movement room, including the ability to go back in later and cut spending if he has to. But that's an old school promise that, Republicans have always let the people down on. They've promised they would cut in the future. But if you go in and cripple Trump now and don't give him the money that he needs to move stuff around, I just think this is still part of his mandate. I think he has a mandate to raise that debt ceiling if he needs to, and then later go back and address Rand Paul's concerns. That's my personal opinion. What do you think? Would you still vote for it if it raised the debt by $5 trillion? Here's the All In podcast on how Mike Johnson is the hero of the week. This is by a Democrat who gives him credit.
Dan, winner of the week.
I'm going to say Speaker Johnson. He got the bill through. He deserves credit for that.
He not only says that Mike Johnson is the winner of the week, but he says largely the Freedom Caucus is no longer the head of the Republican Party, that it's Trump's party now. These guys, Ron Johnson and Rand Paul, they're trying to stay relevant in their own party. Tom Homan going around talking about he wants to help secure the border in the big, beautiful bill.
Border implications of this big, beautiful bill. Tom, thank you so much for joining us. Tell us, how is this reconciliation bill going to affect our border?
Well, look, we made a lot of progress on the border, but we want to keep it permanent. We need the money.
not just for the border, but interior enforcement operations. Money for the border is going to help continue building the border wall. Every place the border barrier has been built, illegal immigrations went down, illegal drug flow went down. So we got to put more border wall up. And plus we got technology in the existing border wall that Joe Biden stopped putting in. As far as the interior enforcement operations, ICE needs money. ICE is in the hole right now. They got about 50,000 people in beds. We're funded for 34,000. ICE is already in the hole. So if we want to continue this massive deportation operation, we need more money.
So ICE is in the hole. That's Tom Homan begging for more money. That money was not budgeted that he's spending for ICE, for technology, for deportations. He needs the money. Are you willing to raise the budget and increase the debt to secure the border?
Will this bill be bad for the Republicans' prospects in the midterms? I guess what I would say to that is, I don't understand how you expect to do well in midterms if Republicans preside over the largest tax increase in decades. A tax increase that Joe Biden tried to get during his administration. Biden tried to raise taxes and couldn't get the votes for it. But if we don't make those tax cuts permanent, if we allow the sunset to happen, then you will accomplish what Joe Biden could not, which is to raise taxes on the American people. So look, no bill like this that's passed by a 1-vote margin on straight party lines when you only have a 3-vote margin in the entire House is going to satisfy everyone. Now,
okay, that's the big, beautiful bill is not going to satisfy anyone. They have to make so many compromises because there's such a tiny margin. But you're saying if it doesn't pass, you got the largest tax increase in American history. You know, if we can expand energy and outgrow that debt, that's one of the big plans that Scott Bessent. Here's David Freeberg on from that All In podcast saying one of the ways that we can beat this debt is by outgrowing it with nuclear energy. If you build one nuclear power station, you will create about 1 terawatt more of energy per year. So we have to online a nuclear reactor every year for 4 years. That'd be pretty good.
Of electricity production capacity per year in the US, I would shut the fuck up about the debt. The critical linchpin for all of those other points of abundance being unleashed is the energy equation. And this is where I look very clearly and plainly at what China's doing versus where we're at today. We've got stated intentions, but the actions are where we're still, we got to start showing up. So the number of watts that the US can make at any given point in time, or is making at any given point in time, is 1 terawatt, 1 trillion watts. Meanwhile, right now, China is making 3 terawatts. And they're scaling up to make 8. We are at 1 going to 2 over the next 15 years.
let's assume that we have enough power.
Yeah, if we have enough power, the 38 trillion of debt doesn't matter.
Really? You're saying that in a...
No, I'm very, very serious way. Yeah.
That's a pretty important conclusion, because if that's true and we can grow our way out of this problem, then that is an alternative to having this austerity approach.
So the austerity approach would be to cut things. And these are the tech billionaires that support Trump, right? And they're not MAGA or anything. They're just flat out nuts and bolts. This is our guy because liberalism is suicide. But he just now said, if you can grow those terawatts to give us the energy that we need, that $38 trillion debt goes away. That is to grow your way out of it. That our true problem is not creating enough energy independence, according to him. There's more.
There are several hardliners in the US Senate who have made it very clear that the budget and the fiscal deficit problems that arise from this bill are insurmountable, and they're going to take a very hard stance on voting no on this bill. Taking the lead on that point of view is Senator Johnson from Wisconsin, who's going to join us today.
What I would shout during the parades was, this is a fight for freedom. We're mortgaging our children's future. It's wrong. It's immoral. It has to stop. That was my campaign theme in 2010. I still view myself more Tea Party than Republican Party. We have a lot of big spenders in the Republican Party as well. And I ran. Budget reconciliation was set up in the Budget Act, I think it was 1974. It doesn't work in terms of controlling spending. By the way, nothing ever has. We'll get into that in terms of we've never had a process for actually controlling spending, but it allows us to pass a budget and then to reconcile the budget. You're able to, and you can pass a budget, it's not a law, but you pass this budget with just 50 votes, 51 votes, majority. And then you can reconcile to that budget, also avoiding the Senate filibuster. So that's the main component. What's weird about it is you pass this budget, but you can only through budget reconciliation, address mandatory spending. You can't touch the discretionary spending accounts, which is about 25% of our budget. That's one of the ways the budget has gotten completely out of control is, we put so many things into the mandatory category. Initially it was entitlements, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, but we have, I would say, deviously slid all kinds of discretionary spending into other mandatory.
Translation, financially, we're screwed, is what he's saying. And I totally agree. I get it. I'm only saying that Trump has to save the country before you can save the budget. Here's Mike Johnson on the accusations that they're cutting Medicaid on the liar Jake Tapper's show.
We are not cutting Medicaid in this package. There's a lot of misinformation out there about this, Jake. The numbers of Americans who are affected are those that are entwined in our work to eliminate fraud, waste, and abuse. And what do I mean by that? You got more than 1.4 million illegal aliens on Medicaid. Medicaid is not intended for non-U.S. citizens. It's intended for the most vulnerable populations of Americans.
Well, there you go. You got illegals using Medicaid. If you remove illegals from Medicaid, the Democrats go out and say Republicans are killing children and kicking them off of Medicaid. Here's a little bit more, a tweet from Stephen Miller. It's a lot of writing, but I just want to get they're trying to get on top of this rumor that they're cutting Medicaid. So I'm going to pass on his message to you. I've seen a few claims making the rounds on the big, beautiful bill that require correction, says Stephen Miller. The first is that it doesn't codify the Doge cuts. A reconciliation bill, which is a budget bill that passes with 50 votes, is limited by Senate rules to mandatory spending only. Example, Medicaid and food stamps. The Senate rules prevent it from cutting discretionary spending. Example, the Department of Education or federal grants. The Doge cuts are overwhelmingly discretionary, not mandatory. The bill saves more than $1.6 trillion in mandatory spending, including the largest ever welfare reform, a remarkable achievement. So that said, we're not going to get to those Doge cuts that everyone wants to cut in this bill because it's a reconciliation bill. You can't go into the discretionary spending and cut them. So it's wrong to expect this bill to do that. Like I said, we have to pass this bill for Trump to save America, for instance, funding the border security. Then on the next bill, we have to go into that discretionary spending and codify Doge into law. Here's the last quote.
We had a wonderful moment here where you have Elon come in with Doge, which the president made possible. Okay. No other president would even have done this.
Agreed.
Big credit for that. Big credit.
Where you get a total outsider to come in and bring a team of like young, big, bald geniuses, and you let them go through these departments line by line and start deleting things. Okay. And they made, I think, great progress. I think they found out 160 billion a year of cuts that can be made administratively. Beyond that, they need Congress to approve it. And I will acknowledge that there are still a number of soft on spending rhino Republicans, and there's just not a majority for the types of austerity and cuts that you guys would like to see. I mean,
okay, so that's coming, but it's not the right time. They're addressing it. If you want to cut border security to bring down the debt that was wasted years ago on opening up the border, that's the conundrum. So I say we pass Trump's bill. I say we raise the debt by $5 trillion, go further into debt, and then immediately turn around and try to find a way to cut that discretionary spending, probably by 25%. I'm Doug in Exile. You're all caught up now. Subscribe.